There are moments in life when silence becomes your sharpest weapon. I learned that at 64, standing in the Live Oak funeral home in my best black dress, while my son and his wife whispered about my future as if I were already gone. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. Trust me, you'll want to follow this story to the very end. My name is Nadia Whitmore, and I have been a widow for exactly 14 days. 14 days since Benjamin drew his last labored breath in that sterile hospital room. 14 days since I held his cold hand and promised him I would be strong. What I didn't promise, what I could never have imagined I'd need to promise, was that I'd protect myself from my own son. On the morning of Benjamin's funeral, I stood at my bedroom mirror fastening the silver locket with the tiny compass he gave me for our 20th anniversary. The reflection showed a woman who had weathered 6 decades with dignity intact. Silver hair pulled into a neat chignon, brown eyes that still held a flame despite the recent tears. I had lost weight during Benjamin's illness, but I carried myself straight, shoulders back, a habit from my years leading a storm response team and lecturing at Georgia Tech, when earning respect on the job site and in the classroom meant everything. Our home in Savannah felt different without Benjamin. We'd lived here 40 years, watching the neighborhood change. Young families had replaced the older couples who once waved from their porches. The Victorian house on Whitmore Street, with its ironwork gate and wraparound porch, was Benjamin's pride. For 20 years he spent every weekend tending the magnolia garden, building the deck, refinishing the hardwood floors we had crossed through decades of marriage. Out of habit, I poured tea into the magnolia-patterned cup engraved BW, then emptied it when I realized what I'd done. The sea wind slipped through the room and gave the silence weight. We had our rituals, Benjamin and I: morning tea, evening news, weekend drives to Tybee Island, simple pleasures that make a life well lived. The doorbell rang at 9:30 sharp. I knew it would be Matthew, my 40-year-old son, and his wife, Rachel. They had been attentive in Benjamin's final weeks, hospital visits, handling arrangements. I was grateful then, mistaking efficiency for compassion. Matthew stood on my threshold in a charcoal suit, every inch the confident financial advisor. He had Benjamin's square jaw, but my brown eyes, without the warmth I remembered from his childhood. Rachel stood beside him in a black dress that likely cost more than my monthly groceries, polished pretty in that way some women achieve in their 30s. Blonde highlights, perfect makeup, manicured nails that never touched real work. "Mom," Matthew said, stepping in to hug me. "How are you holding up?" "I'm trying," I said, breathing in his cologne. When had my boy started wearing cologne more expensive than Benjamin's aftershave? Rachel kissed my cheek, leaving a faint trace of lipstick. "Nadia, you look exhausted. Are you sleeping at all?" "As well as I can," I said. We drove to Live Oak in Matthew's Mercedes. I sat in the back seat like a passenger in my own life. Spanish moss streets of Savannah slid by, the diner where Benjamin and I had our first date, the River Street walkway, the lecture hall where I once taught part-time before Benjamin's projects grew. The service was small but dignified. Benjamin had outlived most of his peers, and Matthew kept the invitations to immediate family and a few neighbors. Reverend Alan Price spoke beautifully about Benjamin's devotion to family and community, about the architecture and development company he had built from nothing into something that supported us comfortably for 30 years. What Reverend Price didn't know, what Matthew and Rachel didn't know, was that Benjamin had been far more successful than any of us realized. I discovered that 3 days after the funeral, when our attorney and trustee, Donovan Pike, called to schedule a meeting. Donovan had handled Benjamin's legal work for years, but Benjamin had always managed our personal finances himself. "A private meeting," Donovan said on the phone. "Just Nadia." Benjamin's instructions were very clear. The meeting was set for the following Tuesday, but Benjamin's secrets were already burning in my chest like swallowed fire. The evening after the funeral, Matthew and Rachel stayed for dinner. I made Benjamin's favorite stew, muscle memory in the kitchen to keep my hands busy and my mind from going hollow. We sat at the dining table where Matthew had done his homework as a boy, where Benjamin and I had shared thousands of meals, where I had served Christmas dinner every year since Matthew was born. "Mom," Matthew began, cutting his meat with precision. Rachel and I have been talking. I set down my fork. Something in his tone tightened my stomach. We're worried about you, Rachel added, her voice wearing that rehearsed concern. Living alone in this big house, managing everything by yourself. I've managed just fine for 64 years, I said evenly. Matthew exchanged a glance with his wife. Dad handled all the finances, the paperwork, the house, utilities, insurance. It's a lot for anyone to handle alone. Your father taught me well, I said. But you don't have to struggle through it by yourself, Rachel rushed on. We've researched some wonderful assisted living communities. Very nice places, Mom. Gardens, activities, medical staff on site 24/7. The words hit me like cold water. Just to look, Mom. Just to see what's out there, Matthew said, leaning forward, earnest in that way that reminded me of him at 12, explaining a broken vase. There's a place called Magnolia Hills Residence, about 20 minutes from our house. We could visit every week, take you to dinner, shopping. I studied their faces across the table, Matthew with sincere concern, Rachel with practiced sympathy. Neither asked what I wanted. Neither suggested I might stay in the home Benjamin and I had built together. I'm not ready to give up my independence, I said carefully. Of course not, Rachel hurried to assure me. But think about it. No more maintenance. No cooking if you don't want to. No more long days alone. And if something happened, if you fell or needed emergency care, nothing is going to happen to me. Mom, you're not getting any younger, Matthew said, impatience creeping in. The same note I knew from his teenage years. Dad is gone, and we're your family now. We just want what's best for you. After they left, I sat in Benjamin's recliner, surrounded by 40 years of memory. Family photos on the mantel, the books we collected, needlepoint pillows I stitched through long winter nights. This was my life, my history, my Victorian on Whitmore Street. But it was also something else, something Matthew and Rachel knew nothing about. It was my sanctuary, my fortress, my launch pad. I went to Benjamin's desk and took out the sealed envelope embossed in gold. Whitmore Trust, private. The one Donovan Pike had asked me to bring to our meeting. Inside were the documents Benjamin left for me, documents that would change everything. As I traced Benjamin's careful handwriting, his final letter to me, I began to understand that my husband had prepared for this moment long before he fell ill. He had seen something in Matthew and Rachel that I, too loving and too hopeful, had refused to see. The letter was dated 6 months before his diagnosis. My dearest Nadia, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you are left with decisions I prayed you'd never have to make. But knowing our son as I've come to know him in recent years, I fear you will. Matthew is not the boy we raised. I don't know when he changed, or if he was always this way and we were too blind to see it. But now he sees you as a burden, and your inheritance as his right. Rachel has encouraged this, and together they will try to convince you that you are helpless, that you need their management. You are not helpless. You never have been. The enclosed documents will show you exactly how much your life is worth to them and to you. Use this knowledge wisely, this. Use it to protect yourself and to teach them what family truly means. I love you, Nadia. I trust you to do what is right. Forever yours, Benjamin. My hands trembled as I set the letter aside and looked at the next document, a summary of accounts and assets that took my breath away. Benjamin's architecture and development company hadn't just supported us, it had made us wealthy. The house was paid in full and valued at about $200,000. Benjamin left me 2 cars, an everyday Mercedes E-Class and a vintage Jaguar, together appraised at roughly $120,000. But it was the financial accounts that made me grip the arm of his chair. The Whitmore Family Trust, $5,000, with me as trustee and primary beneficiary. In addition, $250,000 in liquid funds in my name alone. Matthew and Rachel knew none of this. They assumed we lived on a modest pension, that the house still weighed us down with costs, that I maybe had $50,000 to my name, enough to make me worth managing, not enough to make me independent. They were wrong on both counts. I folded Benjamin's letter carefully and locked it in the desk drawer with the other items, the green leather ledger and the set of gold notary seals. Tomorrow, I would meet with Donovan Pike and learn the full protection system Benjamin had designed for me. Tonight, I would sit in his chair and plan exactly how to handle my son's attempt to warehouse my life. Outside, the sea wind shifted. The tide climbed the Savannah River, and the harbor wind vane turned slowly, like a compass needle warning that a change was close at hand. Benjamin taught me that, how to read wind, read water, measure the distance of change before it hits shore. This time, I was ready. The phone rang, cutting across my calculations. Matthew's voice was warm, concerned. "Hey, Mom, just wanted to check on you before bed. Rachel called Magnolia Hills residence today. They have a room opening next month. They'd be happy to give us a tour this weekend." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of Benjamin's secrets and the sharp clarity of what was coming. "That's very thoughtful of you both," I said softly. "Let me think about it." "Of course, Mom. Take all the time you need. We just want you safe and happy." After I hung up, I sat in the deepening dark and listened to the steady wash of water against the River Street embankment. Tomorrow, I would discover exactly how much my freedom was worth. Tomorrow, I would begin to understand the full scope of Benjamin's gift and the true nature of my son's intentions. But tonight, for the first time since Benjamin died, I smiled. The wind was rising. I was no longer defenseless against it. Donovan Pike's law office occupied the second floor of a brick building on Bull Street, the kind of place that had weathered decades of a port city's changes while keeping its quiet dignity. Tuesday morning, I climbed the narrow stairs, purse tucked tight against my side. Benjamin's documents were secure inside the notarized Whitmore Trust private envelope. Donovan greeted me with the same gentle professionalism he'd shown throughout Benjamin's illness. At 56, he still wore wire-rimmed glasses and conservative ties, the things that had once made him seem older when Benjamin first hired him. His handshake was firm, his eyes kind but serious. "Nadia, please, have a seat. Can I get you some coffee?" "No, thank you." I settled into the leather chair across from his desk, the same chair I'd occupied 6 months ago while Benjamin discussed his will. Then I'd been the supportive wife, letting my husband handle business while I worried about his cough. "Benjamin left very specific instructions about this meeting," Donovan began, opening a thick file. "He wanted to make sure you understood your complete financial picture before—" He paused, choosing his words, "before you had to make any decisions about your future." He spread the documents across his desk like a hand of cards that would decide my fate. Property deeds, bank statements, investment portfolios, insurance policies, a financial landscape I had never fully explored. "Your husband was a remarkable man, Nadia, not only in his devotion to you, but in his business acumen. He turned an architecture and development company into a very profitable enterprise, and more importantly, he invested very wisely." The numbers Donovan laid out left me reeling. Benjamin's company had been sold 5 years ago for $3,000, money he quietly placed into conservative funds and municipal bonds. Our Victorian home in Savannah was worth more than I'd imagined, about $200,000, paid in full. The life insurance policy alone was $1,000. In total, Donovan said softly, "The Whitmore Family Trust holds $5,000. In addition, you have about $250,000 in liquid funds in your own name, plus personal property, your Mercedes E-Class and the vintage Jaguar, together around $120,000. The full picture shows you have more than enough to live exactly as you choose." I stared at the papers, the practical mind of an engineer struggling to process the truth. Benjamin and I had lived comfortably but modestly. We drove used cars, clipped coupons, bought store brands. I mended clothes and planted vegetables in the backyard. "He wanted you to know," Donovan went on, "that he kept your lifestyle modest by choice, not necessity. He believed in safety, in having enough to weather any storm. He also believed—" Donovan hesitated, then pulled out another document. "He believed you might need to protect yourself." It was a letter addressed to Donovan in Benjamin's careful hand. Donovan, by the time Nadia reads this, Matthew will have begun pressuring her to surrender her independence. I've watched my son change over the past few years, influenced by his wife's materialism and his own growing sense of entitlement. They assume Nadia is helpless and poor. They are wrong on both counts. Nadia has the strength to handle wealth, but she may need help recognizing that strength. She has spent decades leading hurricane response projects, managing teams, solving problems, making difficult decisions. She raised a son, ran a household, and supported my business dreams when we had nothing but hope. She is not fragile, not. She is not helpless, and she is not poor. Help her see this. Help her protect herself. And if Matthew challenges her decisions, remind him that family loyalty runs both ways. Benjamin Whitmore. Nadia, Donovan said gently, Benjamin asked me to help you with whatever decisions you make, but he was very clear. The decisions are yours. I folded my hands in my lap, feeling the weight of Benjamin's trust and the sharp clarity of my situation. What exactly did Matthew tell you when he called yesterday? Donovan's eyebrows lifted. I'm sorry. Matthew called me yesterday afternoon? I could tell from his conversation with Rachel when he got home. What did he want? Donovan cleared his throat, uncomfortable. He expressed concern about your ability to manage your finances alone. He asked about establishing a conservatorship. The word hit me like a slap. A conservatorship? It's a legal arrangement where someone else manages your financial affairs, he said. Matthew seems to think it would be in your best interest, given your recent loss, and he said advanced age can make financial decisions difficult. I was 64. I'd been managing budgets and making decisions since before Matthew was born. What did you tell him? I told him it requires a court order and clear evidence of mental incapacity. I also told him any such proceeding would require your consent or an exceptionally compelling medical evaluation. Donovan leaned forward. Nadia, you are nowhere near needing that kind of protection. Your husband knew that. The question is, do you? I left Donovan's office with a new understanding of my power and a crystal clear view of my son's intentions. Matthew didn't want to help me manage my money. He wanted to manage my money. Assisted living wasn't about my safety. It was about his control. On the drive home, I passed Magnolia Hills residence, the place Matthew and Rachel wanted to tour this weekend. The building was pleasant enough. Modern, clean, manicured grounds, a circular drive. But it was also a box. A place where people waited to die while their families managed their assets. I pulled into visitor parking and sat watching the building. Through the wide windows, I saw residents in wheelchairs lined up before a TV, their blank faces catching the afternoon light. Others moved slowly down the halls with aluminum walkers, steps careful and measured. These were not my people. This was not my future. My phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. Can't wait for Saturday's tour. They said there's a lovely room on the second floor with a garden view. I typed back, looking forward to it. I wasn't. I was looking forward to what would come after. That evening, Matthew and Rachel arrived for dinner with a stack of brochures and a tablet full of assisted living options. They had widened the search beyond Magnolia Hills, Pooler, Statesboro, even Atlanta. The great thing about these places, Rachel said, fanning the brochures across my kitchen table, is they handle everything. Meals, housekeeping, medical care, activities. You'd never have to worry about anything again. Some worry keeps a person sharp, I said, serving the chicken casserole I made from Benjamin's mother's recipe. Mom, you've worried enough for one lifetime, Matthew said. Dad would want you to relax, to enjoy your golden years. I wondered what Matthew would say if he knew my golden years were worth $5 million. I've been thinking about what I want to do with my life, I said carefully. Now that your father is gone, I have the freedom to make some changes. Exactly. Rachel's face brightened. That's what's wonderful about these communities. Book clubs, exercise classes, group trips. You could learn pottery or watercolor painting. I'm thinking of something more adventurous. Matthew froze, his fork suspended halfway to his mouth. Adventure travel, maybe volunteer work overseas. Your father and I always talked about seeing the world, helping people less fortunate than we are." The silence that followed said everything. Matthew and Rachel traded a meaningful look, the kind couples use when words would give too much away. "Mom," Matthew said slowly, "it sounds wonderful in theory, but be realistic. You're not 25 anymore. International travel is expensive, and volunteer work can be physically demanding." "I'm in excellent health," I said. Rachel added, "But what if something happens while you're somewhere remote? What if you get sick in another country? What if I get sick right here in Savannah?" "That's different," Matthew said. "Here you have us. Here you have familiar doctors, people who know you." I nodded thoughtfully, as if weighing their concerns. "You make valid points. Maybe I should start smaller, volunteer locally, take a few trips within the States." "That sounds much more reasonable," Matthew said, relief loosening his voice. "Of course you'd need to sell the house first. Too much space for one person, and the maintenance costs are significant." Another shared look flickered between them. "Actually, Mom," Rachel said carefully, "we've talked about that too. The housing market isn't great right now. You might want to hold on to the house for a while, maybe rent it out." "Rent it?" "Matthew and I would be happy to manage it for you," she continued. "Find reliable tenants, collect rent, handle problems as they come up. It would give you a steady income while you're transitioning." Transitioning? Such a careful word for what they had planned. "That's very generous," I said, "but I wouldn't want to burden you with that kind of responsibility." "It's not a burden, Mom. We're family." Family. They kept using that word, but I was beginning to understand they didn't know what it meant. After they left, I sat at my computer and began researching international volunteer organizations. Benjamin had been right. I was not helpless. I had led hurricane response teams for years, balanced tight project budgets, organized community fundraisers after storms, served on professional boards. I had run a household, raised a son, and supported my husband's dream. I was perfectly capable of managing my own life. Habitat for Humanity listed opportunities in 17 countries. Doctors Without Borders needed administrative support in field offices across Africa. The Peace Corps had programs for older volunteers with professional experience. I bookmarked a dozen roles and started filling out preliminary applications. If Matthew and Rachel wanted to play games with my future, I would show them the real stakes. My phone rang at 10:30. Matthew's voice sounded casual, but the tension underneath was clear. "Hey, Mom, Rachel had a thought. Maybe we should schedule that financial planning meeting she mentioned. You know, get a clear picture of your resources before you make any big decisions." "What kind of big decisions?" "Well, you mentioned travel, volunteer work. Those things can be expensive, and we want to make sure you have enough to last." "I see." Donovan Pike could probably recommend a solid financial advisor, someone who specializes in retirement planning. I almost laughed. Matthew had no idea Donovan already knew my finances intimately. "It's thoughtful of you to be concerned about my future." "Of course we're concerned. We love you, Mom." Love. Another word they used without understanding it. "I'll think about it," I said. "Good. And Mom, maybe hold off on any major commitments until we have a better handle on things. You know, just to be safe." After I hung up, I opened Benjamin's desk drawer and took out his letter again. Reading his words, I could hear his voice, feel his presence in the quiet house we'd shared for 40 years. "You are not helpless. You never have been. Benjamin saw this coming. He prepared for it. He trusted me to handle it. He gave me the tools I needed." Tomorrow, I would call the 3 organizations I'd flagged. I would schedule interviews, submit applications, begin the process of reclaiming my life. But tonight, I would plan exactly how to handle Saturday's tour of Magnolia Hills residents. Matthew and Rachel were about to learn that their careful manipulation had a fatal flaw. They had underestimated the woman they were trying to control. I took out a notebook and began a list, not a packing list for assisted living, but a list of questions I would ask on our tour. Questions about costs, about financial requirements, about what happens when residents can no longer afford the monthly fees. questions that would reveal exactly what Matthew and Rachel really knew about my finances, questions that would begin my education in the art of strategic revenge. Outside, the sea wind shifted again, but this time, I wasn't counting the distance between lightning and thunder. This time, I was the tide. Saturday arrived with that clear coastal Savannah sunlight that makes even hard conversations feel possible. I dressed carefully for the tour of Magnolia Hills, the navy cardigan Benjamin once admired, comfortable walking shoes, the silver locket with the tiny compass he gave me. I wanted to look exactly like what Matthew and Rachel expected, a newly widowed woman in need of guidance. They pulled up at 10 sharp, Matthew in pressed khakis and a polo, Rachel in a cheerful yellow maxi dress, somehow turning a nursing home tour into a social event. Her smile was bright, her manner encouraging, but I caught the quick, assessing glance she gave my outfit. "You look lovely, Mom," Matthew said, kissing my cheek. "Ready?" "As ready as anyone can be to tour their potential future," I said. The 15-minute drive to Magnolia Hills residence gave me time to watch my son and daughter-in-law in their natural habitat. Rachel chattered about amenities. Matthew added practical notes about medical care and security. They had clearly done their homework and rehearsed their pitch. "The monthly fee includes everything," Rachel was saying as we pulled into the circular drive. "Meals, housekeeping, activities, basic medical care. It's actually quite reasonable when you consider what you spend maintaining the house." "How reasonable?" I asked. "About $5,000 a month," Matthew said. "It sounds like a lot, but when you factor in property taxes, utilities, food, maintenance, I don't have a house payment." Silence filled the Mercedes. I could almost hear the gears turning in Matthew's head. "Well, no, not a mortgage payment," he said carefully, "but taxes, insurance, upkeep, it all adds up." Inside Magnolia Hills, we were greeted by Caroline Brooks, the executive director. She was about 50, hair carefully styled, her professional warmth the kind that comes from years of guiding families through hard choices. "Mrs. Whitmore, I'm so pleased to meet you. Matthew and Rachel have told me wonderful things." I shook her hand, noting the firmness of her grip and the way her eyes assessed me in a heartbeat: health, mobility, cognition. I'd seen that same look on job sites for years. "Thank you for accommodating us on short notice," I said. "Of course. Let me show you around. I think you'll be impressed with what we offer." The tour began in the main lobby, a pleasant space with comfortable seating, a reception desk, and large windows overlooking the gardens. Residents moved through it at the measured pace of people with nowhere urgent to go. Some used walkers, others walked unaided. All shared that careful gait of those conscious of their fragility. "We have 120 residents," Caroline explained as we walked. "Independent living, assisted living, and memory care, all on one campus. It means you never have to move again, no matter how your needs change." "That's reassuring," I said, watching Matthew nod his approval. We visited the dining room where lunch was being served. The food looked clinical but adequate. Baked chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans. Residents ate quietly, some alone, others in small clusters. A few needed help from staff who moved efficiently between tables. 3 meals a day, Caroline noted, plus snacks available 24 hours. Our dietary staff can accommodate most medical restrictions and preferences. "What about people who like to cook for themselves?" I asked. "Each apartment has a small kitchenette," she said, "but honestly, most residents find it's easier to enjoy the freedom from meal planning." Rachel squeezed my arm. "Imagine never having to grocery shop or cook if you don't want to. You could spend your time on things you actually enjoy." We toured the activity rooms, a library with large print books and jigsaw puzzles, an art room where residents painted watercolor flowers, a rec room where a group was playing bingo for travel-sized toiletries. "We keep a very active social calendar," Caroline said. "Exercise classes, guest speakers, day trips to local attractions. There's always something happening." I watched the bingo players, noting their focus on a simple game, the small thrill over a small prize. These were people who had once run households, raised families, built careers. Now they competed for hand lotion and lip balm. "It looks very organized," I said. "We find structure helps our residents feel secure," Caroline replied. The apartment they showed us was on the second floor, exactly as Rachel had mentioned. It was pleasant enough. A small living area, a bedroom with a hospital-style bed, a kitchenette with a microwave and mini fridge, a bathroom with grab bars and a walk-in shower. "This would be perfect for you, Mom," Matthew said, standing in the middle of the room. "Look at that garden view." Through the window I saw manicured grounds, flower beds, walking paths, benches spaced at regular intervals. Pretty the way a postcard is pretty, designed to please without asking anything of you. "How much personal furniture can residents bring?" I asked. "Great question," Caroline said. "We encourage residents to bring personal items that make them feel at home. A favorite chair, family photos, small decor. But the apartments come furnished with the essentials, so there's no need to move heavy pieces." "And what happens to furniture that doesn't fit?" A brief pause. Caroline glanced at Matthew and Rachel. "Families usually handle that," she said diplomatically. "Storage, donations, sales, whatever works best." I nodded, picturing 40 years of memories sorted into piles. Keep, donate, discard. "And what about residents who want to travel?" I asked. "Visit family, take vacations." "We're very flexible with short trips," Caroline assured me. "We just ask for advance notice so we can adjust meals and activities." "What about longer trips, a month or two?" Her smile tightened. "The monthly fee continues, of course, and we'd need to make sure your apartment remained available." "So I'd pay $5,000 a month even if I weren't here?" "Think of it as maintaining your home base," Rachel cut in quickly. "You'd have the security of knowing you always have a place to come back to." After the tour, we sat in Caroline's office to discuss practical matters. She had prepared a folder with information on costs, services, and admission procedures. "The base monthly fee is $5,000, she explained, "but that can vary with the level of care. If you need help with medications, personal care, or have medical needs requiring additional attention, there are supplemental charges." "What's the maximum monthly cost?" I asked. "For memory care, it can reach $8,000 per month, but that's for residents who need comprehensive assistance." Matthew leaned forward. "What kind of financial documentation do you require?" "We need to verify that prospective residents can afford at least 24 months of care in advance," Caroline said. "Bank statements, investment portfolios, property valuations. We also require a conversation with family members to ensure everyone understands the financial commitment." I watched Matthew's face carefully. 24 months up front means about $120,000 at the base level, Caroline said gently. "It sounds like a lot, but we find it protects both the resident and the facility. No one wants to worry about running out of money." Matthew cleared his throat. "And if someone's resources are limited, are there programs to help with costs?" "Medicaid can cover some expenses," Caroline said. The phone started ringing at 7:30 a.m. hot on Monday. I was in Benjamin's magnolia garden, pulling weeds from the beds and feeling the morning sun on my face when I heard Matthew's ringtone through the open kitchen window. I let it roll to voicemail. He called again at 8:15, then at 9 o'clock. By the time I came inside to wash my hands, there were 4 missed calls and 2 texts. The desperation in his persistence made me smile. I poured tea into the BW Magnolia cup and listened to his messages. "Mom, I got your letter. Can you call me back? I think there might be some confusion about the financial situation. Hey, it's me again. Rachel and I are free this morning if you want to talk in person." "Mom, I'm worried you might be getting bad advice from someone. Please call me." "Okay, I'm coming over. We need to talk." I was still smiling when his Mercedes turned into my driveway at 10 o'clock. Matthew got out alone. Rachel, apparently, was at work, managing a crisis of expectations of her own. He came up my front steps with the determined stride of a man who'd spent the weekend arranging his arguments. "Mom, we need to talk," he said, before I could say hello. "Good morning, son," I said. "Tea?" "This is serious, Mom. What's this about international volunteer work, and why are you meeting with Donovan Pike again?" I led him into the kitchen, moving at my own pace, making him match my rhythm instead of his urgency. "I thought I explained in the letter," I said. "I'm exploring my options." "Mom, be realistic. You're 64. You can't just run off to Africa or wherever you're thinking of going." "Why not?" The question stopped him cold. He stared at me as if I'd suggested joining the circus. Because it isn't safe. Because you don't have the resources for that kind of risk. Because you have responsibilities here." "What responsibilities?" Another silence. Clearly, Matthew had expected this conversation to go differently. "You have a house to maintain, bills to pay, your health to consider, and frankly, you have family who care about you and want to make sure you're okay." I poured him tea and sat across from him at the kitchen table. "Matthew, exactly what do you think my financial situation is?" Well, I know Dad was careful with money, but architecture and development doesn't exactly make people rich. You have the house, probably some savings, Social Security, maybe a small pension, maybe some savings. Mom, I'm not trying to pry, but if you're talking about travel and expensive volunteer work, you need to be realistic about what you can afford. I studied my son's face and saw the anxiety beneath the impatience. He was worried, not about my well-being, but about the inheritance he'd been counting on. "How much do you think I have, Matthew?" "I don't know. Maybe 50, 75. Look, the number doesn't matter. What matters is making it last." "And you think $5,000 a month at Magnolia Hills is the best way to make it last?" "I think it's the best way to make sure you're safe and taken care of. And if the money runs out, Rachel and I would help. We'd never let you be homeless or anything." I set my cup down and really looked at my son. When had he become this calculating stranger? When had his love become conditional on my compliance? "Matthew, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest." "Of course." "If I moved to Magnolia Hills and ran out of money in 5 years, would you and Rachel really take care of me? Would you invite me to live with you? Give me a room in your house? Support me financially?" The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Matthew's face ran through a sequence: surprise, calculation, something like guilt. "Mom, that's not... we'd figure something out. There are programs, other facilities. That's not what I asked." "And look, we don't have to worry about that right now. We just need to focus on making good decisions with the resources you have." I stood, walked to Benjamin's desk, and brought back the folder Donovan had given me. Matthew watched, uneasy, as I returned to the table. "I think it's time you understood exactly what resources I have," I said, opening the green leather ledger and the sealed envelope marked Whitmore Trust, Private. I spread the financial documents across the table: bank statements, investment summaries, property valuations, insurance policies, alongside the green ledger and the sealed envelope. Matthew's eyes widened as he processed the numbers. "This can't be right," he said, lifting a portfolio summary. This says you have over $5 million in the Whitmore Family Trust alone. Your father was a very successful architect-developer. He was also a very private man who believed in living below his means. Matthew stared at the papers, his face shifting from shock to confusion to something that looked a lot like betrayal. "You're rich! You're actually rich!" "I'm comfortable," I said. "I have enough to live however I choose for the rest of my life." But you let Rachel and me..." He stopped, realizing where that sentence was going. "I let you what, Matthew?" "You let us worry about you. You let us think you needed our help. You offered to help. I never asked, but you knew what we were thinking. You knew we were trying to find ways to take care of you." I leaned back, feeling the weight of the moment. "Tell me the truth, Matthew. If you'd known about this money, would you still have suggested Magnolia Hills?" A long pause. That's not the point." "It's exactly the point. If you'd known my Whitmore Family Trust was worth $5 million, plus my own reserve, would you still be so worried about my safety? Would you still be so eager to help me manage my finances?" Matthew's face flushed, his composure cracking. You're being unfair. We were trying to help you. Help me do what? Help me sell my house so you could manage the proceeds. Help me invest in your opportunity. Help me make decisions about my own life. You're twisting this. We were thinking about your future. No, Matthew, you were thinking about your future, about the inheritance you expected, and you were making plans based on that expectation. He stood abruptly and paced to the window. So what? You were testing us? Playing some kind of game? I was observing. I was learning. I was finding out who my son and daughter-in-law really are. And what did you find out? I gathered the financial papers and slid them back into the folder. I found out you see me as a burden to be managed and an asset to be protected. I found out your love comes with conditions and expectations. I found out you have no interest in what I want or need, only in what you think is best for me. That's not true, is it? He caught himself, then hardened. You're 64, Mom. You're not some college kid who can just take off and save the world. Why not? Because you're old, because you're alone, because you don't understand how dangerous the world is. I understand exactly how dangerous the world is, Matthew. I also understand that the greatest danger in my life right now is surrendering my independence to people who don't have my best interests at heart. The words hung between us like a sentence passed. Matthew stared at me, anger in his eyes, and something that looked a lot like fear. So what happens now? He asked quietly. Now you and Rachel decide what kind of relationship you want with me. One based on honesty and respect for my autonomy, or no relationship at all. You're giving me an ultimatum. I'm giving you a choice. The same choice you gave me when you decided I was too old and too incompetent to manage my own life. He sat, shoulders sagging. For a moment, he looked like the little boy I'd raised, confused, uncertain. Then his face closed again. So you're just going to throw away your family, run off to Africa or wherever and abandon the people who love you? People who love me want me happy. They support my dreams, encourage my independence, celebrate my adventures. They don't try to warehouse me in assisted living so they can control my assets. We never said anything about controlling your assets. You offered to manage the sale of my house, to set up an account you would supervise, to invest my money in your opportunity. What would you call that? Matthew was quiet a long time, staring at his hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. I thought you needed us. I thought we were helping. You thought I was helpless and poor. You thought you could make decisions for me because I was too old and too foolish to make them myself. That's not what I thought. Then what did you think, Matthew? What was your plan? He looked up, and for the first time in years, I saw something real in his eyes. Not calculation, not manipulation, feeling. I thought you were going to die alone in this house. I thought you'd get sick or hurt and have no one to help you. I thought you needed me to take care of you. And the money, the inheritance. His face closed again. I don't know what you want me to say about that. I want the truth. Fine. Yes, I thought about the inheritance. Yes, I thought about what would happen to the house, to Dad's things, to whatever money was left after your care. But that doesn't mean I didn't care about you. It means you cared about me as a responsibility, not as a person. It means you made assumptions about what I needed without ever asking what I wanted. Matthew stood again, composure returning. So what do you want, Mom? What's your plan? I smiled, feeling the weight of Benjamin's secrets lift from my shoulders. I want to live. I want to travel. I want to help people who need help. I want to spend the years I have left making a difference. And if something happens to you, if you get sick or hurt overseas, then I'll deal with it. The way I dealt with your father's illness, the way I've dealt with every challenge in my life. And us, what about Rachel and me? That depends on you. If you can accept that I'm an independent woman with my own plans and dreams, you'll always be welcome in my life. If you can't, I shrugged, then you'll have to live with the consequences of your choices. Matthew reached the door, then turned back. Mom, I'm sorry if we handled this wrong, but we really were trying to help. I know you were, Matthew. That's what makes it so sad. After he left, I sat in the quiet kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of Benjamin's love and my son's betrayal. The documents spread across the table stood for more than financial security. They stood for freedom, for capability, for the chance to become someone new. I picked up the phone and called Donovan Pike. "Donovan, it's Nadia. I'm ready to make some changes." "What kind of changes?" "I want to establish a charitable trust to fund my overseas volunteer work. I want to review the tax implications of extended international travel. And I want to make sure my will clearly reflects my intentions." "And Matthew? Have you talked to him about your plans?" I looked out the window at Benjamin's magnolia garden, spring painting the world in greens and golds. "Matthew has made his choice, Donovan. Now it's time for me to make mine." The war was over. I had won, though this victory felt hollow, stained by the cost of learning who my son really was. Tomorrow I would start planning my new life. Tonight I would mourn the family I thought I had. 6 months later, I stood in the red dust of a village outside Arusha, Tanzania, watching the sun drop over the build site where my Habitat for Humanity team had just finished a home for a family of 7. My hands were dirty, my clothes streaked with sweat and paint, my silver hair slipped out from under a Georgia Tech cap. I had never felt more alive. WhatsApp lit up again and again. Matthew, still texting. I'd received dozens of messages over the past 6 months, angry, pleading, manipulative, and finally, desperately apologetic. I glanced at the screen. "Mom, Rachel's pregnant. We're going to need your help. Please come home." I powered off the phone and slipped it into my pocket. The irony didn't blunt the feeling. Now that they had real financial pressure, now that they were staring down the true cost of raising a child, suddenly they remembered they had a wealthy mother. "Mrs. Nadia," called Nuru, a 10-year-old on our crew who had appointed himself my translator and guide. "Come see. Amara and Joseph want to thank you again." I walked to where they stood in front of their new home, a simple concrete block structure with a tin roof, 3 rooms, and running water. Amara, the mother, took my hands and spoke rapid Swahili while Joseph nodded, smiling, and Nuru translated. She says, "You are a blessing from God. She says her children will pray for you every day." I looked at the 3 children, 4, 7, and 10, who now had a safe place to sleep, a clean place to study, shelter from the rainy season floods that had destroyed their last house. This is what wealth is for. This is what my inheritance means. "Tell her it's my honor to help," I said, accepting the Tanzanian woven basket Amara pressed into my hands. That evening, I sat on the veranda of the volunteer guest house, typing on my laptop. The connection was spotty, but I managed to send my weekly blog post to the site I'd started. Blueprints of Freedom. One woman's journey from grief to purpose. The blog had found a surprising audience. Other widows and widowers looking for a spark. Adult children navigating aging parents. People of all ages questioning their life choices. I had become an accidental advocate for late-life reinvention. Week 24 in Tanzania. Today we completed our 8th home. 8 families now have safe, clean houses where their children can thrive. 8 families have hope where there used to be none. But I'm not writing to tell you about them. I'm writing to tell you about me. 6 months ago, I was a widow choosing between independence and security. My family offered me security, a safe place to live, people to manage my affairs, protection from life's uncertainties. All I had to give up was my autonomy, my dreams, and my right to choose my own path. I chose differently. I chose uncertainty over safety, risk over comfort, purpose over ease. Some of you have asked whether I'm angry at my son. The answer is complicated. I'm not angry. Anger is exhausting and I don't have time for it. I'm disappointed. I'm sad. But I'm not angry. What I am is free. Free to wake each morning and choose how to spend my day. Free to use my resources to make a difference. Free to discover parts of myself I never knew. At 64, I am stronger than I was at 30, more confident than I was at 40, more purposeful than I was at 50. Age is not a prison sentence. Widowhood is not a death sentence. Family obligation is not life without parole. You are never too old to start over. You are never too set in your ways to change. You are never too far from shore to chart a new course. Next week, I fly to Uganda to begin a 3-month assignment with Doctors Without Borders, MSF. I'll manage logistics for a mobile clinic serving remote villages around Gulu and Entebbe. It's demanding work. It's meaningful work. After that, I'm considering an offer to teach English in Vietnam. At 64, I'll be the oldest volunteer in the program. I can't wait. The safety my family offered was an illusion. The only real security is knowing you can take care of yourself, that you have the resources and the courage to face whatever comes. I have both now. I have the financial resources Benjamin left me, and the courage I found in myself. To those of you facing similar choices, trust yourself. Trust your instincts. Trust your right to live life on your own terms. The people who truly love you will support your choices, even if they don't understand them. The people who don't, their opinions matter less than you think. From Tanzania, with love and hope. Nadia. I posted the entry and closed the laptop. My phone buzzed with another message from Matthew, but I ignored it. Tomorrow, I would fly to Arusha, then to Entebbe, then on to a small village in northern Uganda, where people needed medical care more than they needed my family drama. The stars over Tanzania were spectacular, untouched by city light. I sat in the darkness thinking about Benjamin, about the gift he'd given me, about the life I'd built from the ashes of his death. Benjamin had known. Somehow, he had seen what I couldn't, that Matthew and Rachel would try to control me, would try to turn me into a burden to be managed instead of a person to be loved. He had given me the tools to fight back, to choose my own path. My phone rang. Not Matthew this time, an unknown number with a Savannah area code. Hello, Mrs. Whitmore. This is Caroline Brooks from Magnolia Hills Residence. I'm calling about your son. I sat up straighter. About him? He's been calling us repeatedly to ask about financial assistance programs for residents. He seems to think you might need our services in the future. I almost laughed. I see. I wanted you to know we don't discuss residents or prospective residents with family members without written consent, but he's been quite persistent. Thank you for telling me, Caroline. I appreciate your discretion. Mrs. Whitmore, I hope you don't mind my saying this, but I follow your blog. What you're doing, it's inspiring. You're showing people that life doesn't end at 60. Thank you. That means a lot. Your son mentioned you're overseas. Is it everything you hoped it would be? I looked out at the African night and listened to the village settling into sleep, felt the satisfaction of a day spent building something that mattered. It's more than I hoped, I said. It's everything I didn't know I needed. After I hung up, I thought about Caroline's call. Matthew was still trying to control the narrative, still trying to conjure a crisis to justify his intervention. The idea of him calling assisted living facilities, painting me as a confused old woman in need of rescue, would have horrified me 6 months ago. Now, it just seemed pathetic. I opened my laptop and began typing a new email. To Matthew and Rachel, congratulations on the pregnancy. I'm sure you'll be wonderful parents. I've received your messages about needing help. I understand that raising a child is expensive and that you're worried about the future. But I need you to understand something. I am not your financial backup plan. I am a 64-year-old woman living the life I choose. I am healthy, happy, and useful. I'm using my resources to help people who need help, to make a difference where the difference is desperately needed. I am not lost. I am not confused. I do not need to be rescued. I am free. If you want a relationship with me, it will be on terms of mutual respect and understanding. You will not try to manage my life, control my finances, or make decisions for me. You will not call assisted living facilities on my behalf. You will not spread stories about my mental capacity or my ability to care for myself. If you can accept these terms, you are welcome to contact me. If you cannot, then I wish you well and hope you find the strength to solve your own problems without depending on others. I love you both. but I love myself more. Nadia, P.S. I am changing my will. The Victorian in Savannah will be donated to Habitat for Humanity upon my death. My liquid assets will be divided among Doctors Without Borders, MSF, the Peace Corps, and a scholarship fund for late-life career changers. I wanted you to know so you can plan accordingly. I hit send and closed the laptop. The lie about the will was strategic. Let them think their inheritance had vanished. Let them face the reality of supporting themselves without my money as a safety net. In truth, I hadn't decided what to do with my estate. But I had decided one thing. Whatever I left would go to people who saw value in what I was trying to do, not to people who saw me as a problem to be solved. The next morning, I packed for Uganda. 6 months in Tanzania had taught me I was capable of more than I'd ever imagined. I could adapt to new cultures, learn new languages, solve problems I'd never met before. I could be useful, valuable, necessary, not because of what I owned, but because of what I could contribute. As the plane lifted off from Arusha, I thought about the woman I'd been 6 months ago, grieving, uncertain, vulnerable to other people's manipulation. That woman was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized, but deeply admired. At the airport in Entebbe, I checked my phone for the first time in 24 hours. 17 missed calls from Matthew, 6 from Rachel, and 1 email from Donovan Pike. Nadia, I've been contacted by Matthew regarding your mental capacity and your ability to manage your affairs. I want you to know that I refuse to discuss your situation with him, and that I consider you to be of sound mind and fully capable of making your own decisions. However, I thought you should know he is considering legal action to establish a conservatorship. Please call me when you have a chance. Regards, Donovan. I stared at the email and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Anger. Not the hot, impulsive kind, but the cold, strategic anger of someone pushed too far. Matthew wanted to declare me incompetent. He wanted to control my life through legal manipulation. I opened my laptop and began a new blog post. My final gift to my son. Some of you have asked what I would do if my family tried to force me back into the life I left behind. Today I learned my son is attempting to have me declared mentally incompetent so he can control my finances. He calls it concern for my welfare. I call it what it is, theft. But I'm not writing to complain. I'm writing to thank him. His actions clarified something I've wrestled with for months, what to do with my inheritance. I came to Africa to find purpose. I found it. I came to find meaning. I found it. I came to find freedom. I found it. I also found clarity. My son sees my money as his birthright. He sees my independence as a threat to his inheritance. He sees my happiness as irrelevant to his needs. He's right about one thing. My money will help people, just not the people he thinks. I'm not angry. I'm liberated. My son wanted my money. Instead, he's going to get a lesson in consequences. The greatest gift you can give your children isn't wealth. It's your example. I hope my son learns from mine, from Uganda, with love and liberation. Nadia. I posted the entry and closed the laptop. Tomorrow, I would call Donovan Pike and make the changes to my will official. Tonight, I would sleep under the African stars, dreaming of the life I'd built from the ashes of the one I left behind. Outside my window, the sounds of Entebbe settled into the quiet of night. Somewhere in Savannah, Georgia, Matthew was probably planning his next move, strategizing with Rachel about how to control a woman who had already slipped beyond their reach. Let him plan. Let him scheme. Let him discover that the woman he tried to warehouse was stronger, smarter, and more determined than he ever imagined. I am Nadia Whitmore, and I am finally, gloriously free. The war was over. I had won, and the victory was sweeter than I ever thought it could be. That's my story. That's how I learned that the greatest inheritance isn't money. It's the courage to live life on your own terms. If you're facing something similar, remember, you are stronger than you think, more capable than they believe, and more valuable than they know. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. And remember, it's never too late to start over.